Chapter 3. Investigation of the four bodies in detail. A methodical approach to explanation. So far, during the search for the eye, we turned the four bodies inside out and could not find a trace of it. It is true that the eye disappeared without words beyond the four bodies, where even the ideas of I and you do not exist, however. It will not do to just keep quiet and mistake this for deep silence. In the exposition thus far, the gross, the subtle, the causal, and the great causal bodies have been superficially described. It is necessary to examine in detail all aspects of the four bodies. Unless these are fully understood correctly, and this understanding is made a part of one's nature, an aspirant will not be able to arrive at this deep silence, which is reality. We will therefore examine in detail what the aspects of the four bodies are. It is necessary to understand that these four bodies are the four steps that one must ascend in order to proceed onto the fifth rung of deep silence, which is nishabda, where the word becomes silent. Going step by step, one can surely reach the end of the journey. However, if some steps are missed, and one puts one's foot on the next step prematurely, there is a likelihood of losing one's balance and falling back. Therefore, it is only when one body is fully understood that the aspirant should continue on to the next body. Without using this methodical approach, if one starts stepping up the steps too hastily, there will be confusion. In this confusion, true understanding will not be gained, and the aspirant will likely misunderstand the subtle differences between deep sleep and samadhi, as well as mistake ignorance for knowledge. By way of comparison, consider the difference between a toy top that is still when it is not moving and when it appears to be still due to intense speed, or the difference between total darkness and the blackout that is caused by intense light. Although these things appear similar from a casual glance or superficial perspective, there is a vast difference between the two states, and their usefulness or capacity is also different. If one works methodically step by step to gain understanding, there will be no confusion as to the subtle differences that are being indicated. Here it is prudent to bring to the attention of the reader the method of exposition of a subject that is provided in the ancient scriptures. This will convince the aspirant that there is no basis for any doubts to arise regarding any apparent contradictions in the method adopted for the exposition of some particular point in the scriptures. Therefore, we must first describe the method of expounding the teaching that has been adopted by the ancient scriptures. This is often referred to as the primary premise presented in the Vedas. When a subject is to be explained to an aspirant, there is first a description of the subject matter. Showing its great importance, it is then explained that a great reward will follow if the subject matter is correctly understood. Once the aspirant understands the subject completely, before moving on and explaining the next subject, the instructor using the scriptural method is to first impress upon the aspirant the uselessness of the subject that has already been understood. Only after that can the importance of the subject to be taught next be impressed upon him. The reason for this method is that there is no inclination for one to strive to understand a subject unless its importance is first brought out, with a promise of some reward as a motivation. Next, the uselessness of the subject matter just learned is brought home to the aspirant, so that the subject is automatically renounced, and the aspirant becomes eager to understand what is to be presented as the next topic. The Mother Shruti. The Vedas takes into consideration the psychological background of an aspirant, and then it inspires him to work for food, first telling him that the food is Brahman. She then gives him time to fondle the gross body, telling him that the gross body is Brahman. Then it is explained that all experiences of joy that come to the gross body are actually enjoyed by the subtle body. The gross body is shown to be merely a corpse, and it is told how the corpse could in no way enjoy anything if it were not for the subtle body. Thus, the uselessness of the gross body is demonstrated. Next, the mind, intellect, senses, and the sheath that makes up the prana's vital breaths are described. And the subtle body is said to be Brahman. It is shown to be bigger or more expansive than the gross body. In this way, the Vedas give importance to the subtle body. After that comes the description of the causal body, which is still and even more expansive than the subtle body. It swallows the subtle body. The causal body is then proclaimed to be Brahman, and the advice is given to the aspirant that you yourself have become the expansive causal body. However, since the causal body is considered to be ignorance and in total darkness, the final claim of it being the self cannot really be made here. Accordingly, the aspirant is therefore compelled to investigate further into the great causal body. This great causal body is still more expansive, and it is from here that the voice saying I am the witness emanates. Upon arriving here, the great causal body, or Turiya state, is investigated and examined thoroughly. In this way, the Mother Vedas dismiss each body after having asserted that it was Brahman, when she is finally confronted with the problem of explaining the changeless, attributeless Brahman Nirguna Brahman. She claims an inability to describe it, and only keeps repeating the sentence, not this, that which is not ignorance, and that which is not knowledge is Brahman, and that which you call Brahman is not Brahman. In such a negative way, Mother Shruti describes Brahman as that which is beyond all of the four bodies. The principle of what has just been described is as follows. When it said that one body is bigger than the previous body, it does not mean that it is higher in relation to it, etc. In a comparison of needles, for example, the needle used for stitching jute bags is bigger than one used for cotton, but it is not bigger than an iron rod that is used for digging. This indicates that qualities like bigger and smaller are not inherent in a thing, but are imposed upon it by relating it to or comparing it with some other thing. The same rule applies here. After listing in sequence first food as Brahman, then gross body as Brahman, then subtle body as Brahman, then the causal, and finally the great causal body as Brahman. And in each case, the latter being greater than the former, the intention is to give the instruction and demonstrate the principle that out of all these, ultimately, none can be said to be Brahman. Although it is shown that in each case that the latter state is relatively higher or more expansive than the previous one, it is still not Brahman. And moreover, this para-Brahman is absolutely unique and beyond all of these four bodies. While utilizing the above-mentioned method of explaining a point, it is necessary to understand clearly just what it is that is being described as Brahman. Why is it that it should be described in this way? How far can one go to describe it as being with some particular qualities? Moreover, why is it that what was once called Brahman is then negated as not being Brahman in the same breath? It is important to understand this correctly. For example, in giving instruction on how to cook rice to a person who is not a proper cook, the person is told to first light a fire under the utensil in which the rice is being cooked. After some time, another instruction is given to the same person to put the fire out now. It is natural that the person may wonder about the contradictory instructions. His teacher explains to him, Dear one, it is necessary to keep a fire under the utensil until the rice is cooked. But later, the fire has to be put out. Otherwise, we would get coals instead of rice. This is the reason why any method to be practiced is necessary only until its goal is achieved. Otherwise, it will only bring on exhaustion and nothing further beneficial will be achieved. Thus, when the subtle body being called as Brahman is thoroughly examined and understood, the merit of calling the subtle body as Brahman loses its value, and it becomes necessary to move on and continue the search for I by examining the next thing. This demonstrates that sometimes when we offer a price for something, or place some value on it in order to achieve some particular results. That value that we have placed on it may not necessarily be the real value of that thing. For example, some occasion may arise in one's life where you might have to address even a donkey as uncle. In this example, the honor that is given to the donkey is due to some consequence you must endure for some action done. In the same way, some great calamity that someone may be facing is because he has forgotten his real nature. It is therefore necessary to become liberated from the calamity or obstruction, which is like being caught in the jaws of a crocodile. If you free yourself from the crocodile by flattery saying that her back is very smooth, does it really mean that her back is as soft as a feather mattress? This question should be asked of the man who gets released from the crocodile's jaws, to rid oneself of the crocodile-like grip of the four bodies. They are called Brahman for some short period of time, taking into account that this is the method of explanation that will be used. We will now turn our attention to the actual explanation and description of the four bodies. The investigation commences. The nature of the gross body is quite well known. It is a mass of flesh and blood that can be touched with the hand, and all are quite familiar with it. Not only that, but everyone uses it fully. The gross body is I, and therefore all the passions and desires that happen to the body are mine. Accordingly, the dark or fair complexion of the body and the stages of childhood, youth, and old age belong to me. The relationship of the body to caste, religion, house, land, and wealth are all mine. This is a lesson that every human being has learned through many births, and he has learned it very well. In fact, it is so well learned that even while dreaming, someone will tell you that he is so and so. It is therefore not necessary to teach anyone this lesson that has been repeatedly learned over and over, and has been so firmly implanted in one's psyche. The feet of all human beings are resting steadily on the step of this gross body. The state of this gross body is that of wakefulness, and in this body there is partial forgetfulness and partial remembrance. The quality of worldly action, or Rajaguna, is predominant in the gross body. This basic explanation is enough for one to understand the gross body. We will now turn to the next step, that of the subtle body. As has been previously stated, the subtle body is a committee. It is a collection of the senses, the pranas, the mind, the intellect, seated on the inner mind antakarana, which collectively create a type of mental world or dream world that is seen when the visible world becomes invisible, when closing the eyes, after some thought and investigation. It can be noticed that the subtle body is really a very peculiar thing. Upon examination, it can be seen that all of the movements of the gross body are according to the dictates of this subtle body. The assertion of a concept, such as something is like this, is called sankalpa, and a doubt. Or the notion that something is not like this is called vikalpa. This subtle body is such that it is always presenting this perverse type of knowledge of contradictory thoughts, and its state is that of dreaming. Continuous memory is the indicative quality of the subtle body, and the quality of awareness, or sattvaguna, is the quality that is predominant here. After being introduced to the subtle body in this way, the aspirant becomes that body. When one foot is planted firmly on the next step, the other foot is lifted from the previous step and placed beside the first foot. In this way, one leaves the first step completely. When one crosses the boundaries of a village and puts his foot within the limits of the next village, the first village is left behind, and one becomes a traveler to the next village. Similarly, in order to understand properly the step of the subtle body described above, When the aspirant plants his foot firmly on this step, he has to lift his foot from the gross body in order to bring this understanding into practice. When the gross body is left behind, the aspirant then has to sever all connections with it. However, this work is not so easily done, as it seems that for crossing over these steps, every human being has only two legs. One leg is the leg of learning, and the other is the leg of putting into practice what one has learned. Taking both feet away from the step of the gross body and planting them on the step of the subtle body means that one has to transcend the physical body. When one leaves behind the sense of pride and possession of the gross body and takes up the pride of possession in the subtle body, he has to say, "I am only the subtle body." Only when this is experienced does it mean that the gross body has been renounced and the subtle body is now accepted as I. When the aspirant comes to this second step, then the lower step is left behind, and one now accepts that the gross body is not I. The I has no relationship with the gross body. The changes that happen to the gross body and its qualities, such as having a dark or fair complexion, are no longer considered as mine. No qualities of the gross body belong to me, as I am only the subtle body. This means that the qualities of the subtle body, such as the senses, the pranas, the mind, the intellect, the sense of I am, etc., are not endowed with gross physical qualities such as fat or thin, dark or fair, young or old, etc. It is clear that I am only the mind and the intellect, etc., with subtle qualities. If the aspirant studies this diligently, then both feet become firmly planted on the second step, and he loses the sense of pride in and identification with the gross body. He becomes indifferent to all qualities and conditions of the gross body. Third step is above and beyond the subtle body, and is the causal body, or ignorance. The causal body is a state of pure forgetfulness, where the quality of ignorance or tamoguna is predominant. Here, in the causal body, there is no thought as to the well-being of, or any relationship with, either the gross or the subtle bodies. The causal body means that there is no knowledge of anything. It is like the state of deep sleep, but it is not deep sleep. The causal body is difficult to understand. However, it is very important to understand this state. Those who proclaim to understand the principle of zero-nothingness, the void, came to this state and turned back, saying that there was nothing ahead. The causal body is the state of the unknowable, or the void, which is presented in the point of view of Western philosophers. This state, which is devoid of all thoughts, imagination, and doubts, is often mistakenly taken by aspirants to be samadhi, and thought to be the same as Brahman without concepts or qualities, nirvikalpa Brahman. When this void or state of emptiness is reached, one is likely to get a false satisfaction and say, "Today I saw Brahman." The interval or pause between where one modification of the mind disappears and another one does not arise, such as the space between two thoughts, or the intervening pause before sleep sets in and the waking state disappears, is a state of pure forgetfulness. This is what is described as the covering of bliss, anandamaya kosha, in the scriptures. In the causal body, all chaos, struggle. In the causal body, all chaos, and the infinite number of waves of thought have ceased. Therefore, there is a sense of peace in this third body that is not found in the other two bodies. It is true that the aspirant experiences a certain joy, but this is not ultimate peace, or even true bliss. One must understand this point very well. This causal body is the natural state of all the gods, demons, and every human being. The state of the causal body is the state of forgetfulness. The chief sign or indication of the causal body is to forget everything. For example, unless one forgets everything, he cannot get deep sleep. To say I was asleep, but I remembered something is to really say, I never slept. To really have deep sleep means not to remember a single thing. Similarly, to forget everything while in an awakened state is to enter the causal body. To be in a state where you do not know anything is to also come to this state. As previously mentioned, this is the natural state of a human being. Even the most learned scholars do not understand the nature of a human being, let alone the nature of Shiva. In order for one to fully understand this state of human forgetfulness, the method of studying the pause is prescribed. If anything is very difficult, it is to be completely stabilized in the state of forgetfulness, and to know it thoroughly. To achieve this is important in one's spiritual progress, and takes considerable effort on the part of the aspirant. The saints have put particular emphasis on this point. The pause between two states is nothing but pure consciousness. The state of the Mauni, a silent one, is such that he does not allow a single word to rise. Or even if it did rise, he does not allow its meaning to rise, but simply lets it slip by. When the word rises and is allowed to impress its meaning on the inner mind, the world is born. Ignoring the word and not allowing it to carry any meaning for the mind is the eradication of the world. When the word does not energize the mind, what remains is the pure energy of consciousness. To experience this state continuously is called the state of silence. The aspirant who is about to put his foot on the third step after climbing the first and second is told that this step is the state of pure consciousness. He is under the impression that this state is the pure void, and taking this void to be Brahman, he is unable to witness the void. However, when the aspirant proceeds to the fourth step, he begins to look back at the third step. Being unable to see anything in the void of the causal body, he wonders why the Guru has instructed him to put his foot on this step of nothingness, which doesn't exist at all. The reason is that once pure consciousness is known, there can be no trace of anything that is called ignorance, so one does not come to understand what the state of forgetfulness is once known. There does not arise any modification in the aspirant's mind except that of pure consciousness. Knowledge or consciousness presents itself to the aspirant in two ways. 1. When there is an object in consciousness, it becomes objective knowledge, and one will experience it as knowledge of objects. 2. When there is no object, it is experienced as objectless knowledge or pure consciousness. When there is an object, that is called objective knowledge. When there is no object, that is simply knowledge, which is pure awareness or consciousness, with the exception of these two, objective knowledge and pure knowledge. No other modifications are present in the aspirant's mind. In pure consciousness, the word ignorance is meaningless from the aspirant's point of view. It is not possible for forgetfulness to exist in his case. Whatever is experienced will either be objective knowledge or pure consciousness that is without any objects. Presenting the state of the causal body to the aspirant that it is just ignorance, a void, a state of forgetfulness, or something where there is nothing to bring home to him, is to lead him to the above fact of pure consciousness. By analogy, a teacher will draw on the blackboard a point of great length and breadth in order to teach the student about a point that has neither length nor breadth. Similarly, this is how the point is being illustrated here. If it is not done in this manner, the next step cannot be explained. The aspirant should therefore have full faith in the Sadguru without further argument, and take it for granted that there is a state of forgetfulness. He should thus commence practicing what is being told, and begin the process of forgetting each and everything. It must be understood that the casual body is the cause of the two previous bodies, hence the label causal body. Here, the example is given of the side curtain on a theater stage, which is called the wing, from which the actors emerge and where they again disappear back into The causal body, which is the natural state of a human being, is like this wing on the stage and exists in the state of the form of forgetfulness. From behind this curtain, all memories appear and then disappear. When we say that we have forgotten a thing before remembering it, this means that the thing was abiding there in that state of forgetfulness, and it is proved that it has emerged from that state alone. In opposition to this, when we say that we forgot a certain thing, this means that the thing that was in memory has disappeared behind this curtain of forgetfulness, a memory before it is forgotten, and something forgotten after it is remembered, are companions in this arena of forgetfulness. The rising and setting of all ideas are in the womb of this one forgetfulness, which is the common ground for all human beings. It is by reason of this forgetfulness that each human being feels he is ignorant and strives to obtain knowledge. During this struggle, the majority unfortunately only gain worldly knowledge, thus missing the knowledge of their true nature. When introducing the causal body in the manner described above, the Sadguru tells the disciple, "Dear one, you are not the gross physical body, and you are not the subtle body. So you should identify yourself with the causal body. For an aspirant to be in the state of forgetfulness, it means that he should have the feeling that I am definitely not the gross body, and I am not the subtle body. Therefore, all of the dreams and doubts that arise in the subtle body do not reside in me. I am complete forgetfulness, empty of all concepts and imaginings. The birth and death of the body, the miseries and temptations, the pain and pleasure, the miseries and temptations, the pain and pleasure, as well as the hunger and thirst that arise in the pranas, cannot touch me. Honor and dishonor are only notions in the mind, and qualities such as fair or dark complexion belong to the physical body. But I am none of these. Nothing can attach itself to me. I am forgetfulness." Committing oneself to this lesson again and again, and becoming firmly established in the state of forgetfulness without any idea or attachment, it becomes our own nature. In this way, one experiences oneself as being completely empty of all of the qualities of the gross and the subtle bodies. When this practice of experiencing oneself as forgetfulness is firmly established, the aspirant definitely rises to the third step, becoming steady in this forgetfulness. The aspirant is worthy of proceeding to the next step, to the great causal body, Mahakarana body, the Turiya state. However, before going to the next step, it is necessary to mention that the causal body, although similar to deep sleep, is a state quite distinct from sleep. In deep sleep, all the senses are in complete repose with the complete absence of any activity, and consequently any perception of sense objects. In deep sleep, all beings enjoy the bliss of being in their own nature, yet do not really know their true nature. Upon awakening from deep sleep, everyone will say these two sentences: "I slept happily, and I did not know anything." Like this, everyone conveys the contentment and bliss of their own nature, as well as their ignorance regarding it. In this manner, although one unknowingly conveys their awareness of ignorance, it also proves the existence of a deeper awareness. However, this does not mean that one was aware of their true self, even though they were experiencing it during deep sleep. During deep sleep, one does not experience the awareness that is present there. For example, suppose that there is a person who is unknowingly an heir to a treasure of buried gold coins. Every day he goes to sleep on the ground and does his normal begging in the morning for his livelihood. For him, the treasure is as good as not being there at all. Similarly, each human being goes into and comes out of their true nature, diving deep and experiencing bliss. However, the deep ignorance about one's real nature is there as part of that experience. It is for this reason that deep sleep cannot be the means of gaining self-knowledge. The knowledge of one's true nature. In deep sleep, the aspirant has no ability to study that state. However, this is not the case with regard to the state of forgetfulness. To study forgetfulness is to enjoy the state of deep sleep while being fully awake. The manner in which to enjoy this wakeful deep sleep is taught by the Sadguru. How does a fish sleep while living in water? One can only understand this if you get a birth in that species. How can the sleep of a fish not be disturbed by the water entering into its eyes? This secret is known only when one is born as a fish. In the same way, how can one experience and understand this deep sleep state while one is fully awake? One can only understand this by becoming a true son of the Sadguru, a Guruputra. The causal body, which is of the nature of forgetfulness, is nothing but a very deep sleep. However, that which is described above is the silence within that is experienced knowingly or consciously. During the waking state, it is not the deep sleep state that comes unknowingly, without conscious awareness. Nothing is known in the state of deep sleep which comes unknowingly. However, the nature of the self can be known by means of employing the method of knowing forgetfulness which is experienced while awake. This is the difference between deep sleep and samadhi. Although it is known that forgetfulness is a state where nothing is known, the fact is that after everything is forgotten, knowledge remains. This knowledge can only be understood through the study of forgetfulness. This state of forgetfulness exists and must be understood. Deep sleep and forgetfulness are both the result of tamoguna. By way of analogy, an analysis of coal and diamond shows that both are made of carbon. This means that the coal and the diamond are but two aspects of carbon. Although this is the case, there is a vast difference in their respective values when the ingredient of carbon is the same in both. How is it that the diamond shines and the coal is black and lusterless? The reason is that the proportion of the same component is different in the two. Likewise, deep sleep and forgetfulness share different proportions of ignorance, which explains why, in deep sleep, the immense density of ignorance is felt, while in forgetfulness, the flimsiness of ignorance is realized. As the depth of deep sleep decreases, the onset of wakefulness arises. The man who wakes up from deep sleep is at first slightly under the fuzzy influence of sleep, and then awakens slowly. This state is the result of the depth of sleep becoming thinner or more flimsy as the state of full wakefulness emerges and sleep ends. Deep sleep is like a pitch-black curtain which covers the lamp of the self, while the causal body, or the state of forgetfulness that is being examined, is like a thin transparent velvet curtain. This means that the enjoyment of bliss is the same in both deep sleep and the causal body forgetfulness. However, from the point of view of achieving the knowledge of one's true nature, deep sleep is useless. It is like attempting to procreate by having sexual intercourse with a barren woman. The study of this sheath of bliss, Anandamaya Kosha, in the form of the state of forgetfulness, provides one with joy and is a necessary step in reaching the goal of knowing one's true nature. Having said all of this, we will now observe the great causal body, or the Turiya state, which is endowed with the knowledge that comes after the study of forgetfulness. Here, let us digress a little. Those aspirants who have taken the traditional mantra, according to the tradition of Sri Sadguru Babasaheb Maharaj, may have doubts at this point. The study of the causal body means that one should learn to forget everything. Does this also mean that repeating the mantra given by the Guru and the color or forms that stand before one's half-closed eyes should also be forgotten? The answer is yes, you have to do this. Before doing this, while repeating the mantra, the colors and whatever forms are present, and the aspirant must check for oneself that the mental noises and chatter cease and die out completely. When concentrating on the tip of the nose with half-closed eyes in a relaxed manner, with the exception of the repetition of the mantra and the color form, there should not arise any other word or form. This having been done, even that has to be forgotten. The broom in one's hand that is used to sweep out the rubbish in the house should not be kept in the hand after the rubbish has been cleaned out from every corner of the house. The broom also has to be thrown out in the end. The Sadguru imparts the mantra to the aspirant as a discipline. He gives a tool in the form of the mantra which sweeps clean all rubbish in the form of doubts, fears, imaginings, and concepts that have been accumulated over the infinite number of births. This tool of the mantra helps the aspirant learn how to concentrate or focus his attention, and enables the mind to become subtle. How the tool should be utilized, and when it should be left alone, has now been clearly explained. Now, we will see what the fourth body, the great causal body, is. The great causal body is also known in the teachings of Vedanta as the Turiya state, or Satchitananda. It is called great causal because it is above, or beyond the limits of the causal body. It is the father of the other three bodies. In Hindu mythology, King Janaka means creator, or producer, was one without a body, Vidihai. He had a daughter named Janaki. Janaki means awareness. This mythological story tells us that King Janaka is the same as the fourth body, the great causal body. This indicates a state of consciousness that is without a body in spite of the fact that the body still exists. That is the state of knowledge in the fourth body. This is King Janaka. Out of him, the daughter Janaki awareness is created. Compared with the previous three bodies, the fourth body is a state that is without a body, and without any conditions in the form of knowledge, however. This does not mean that there is an absence of knowledge found in the previous three bodies. Knowledge is the same whether it is in an agitated condition or in equanimity. It is clean and pure in the state of equanimity, as well as in the disturbed condition, even when immersed in the flood of objective knowledge in all states. Knowledge is one and the same, however. The knowledge in the first three bodies is adulterated knowledge, or conditional objective knowledge. The knowledge in the state of the great causal body is balanced with an intermingling of the three gunas, rajas, tamas, and sattva, and can be experienced as pure knowledge. Whether knowledge is in a balanced or an unbalanced state, knowledge is always knowledge. However, it is different with respect to its conditioning, because of the identification with particular conditionings of knowledge. A human being sees differences and creates distinctions and separateness in the one knowledge. For example, the sweetness that one tastes in the various sweets called ladus or jalebis or basundis is all sugar, however. Because it is in these particular forms, we say that the laddu is sweet, the jalebi is sweet, or the basundi is sweet. If we taste some sugar that is not mixed with any other ingredients, we will say that sugar is sweet. If someone is given a description of what sugar is like, and is given a laddu, and told that the sweetness in the laddu is sugar, he will never get the knowledge of the true nature of sugar. However, if he is given pure sugar, unmixed with any other ingredients, he will know exactly what sugar is. This example illustrates why knowledge cannot be experienced in its primal state in the first three bodies, because it is always in some form of conditioning. In the first three bodies, it will always be experienced only as objective knowledge. In the fourth body, that knowledge that is non-objective and pure, and which is not apparent visible in the other three bodies, shines in its pure nature. This is the reason why aspirants have to be taken to the great causal body. When pure knowledge or consciousness is known, then even if it is mixed with objective knowledge, or is in any other state, the aspirant will understand correctly that the entity that is called the world is not separate or different from that which is called the knowledge of the self-knowledge. Even when each state comes and goes, the witness of these states does not come or go anywhere. The one who sees the dark and fair complexion, as well as childhood, youth, and old age of the physical body, is also the one who sees all concepts, imaginings, dreams, and doubts in the subtle body. The same witness also sees the causal body, where there is a complete absence of concepts, imagination, and doubts. The one who witnesses all three of these bodies is forever awake. There is a story of a woman with a peculiar characteristic who delivered a child. The child died before it knew its mother, and never saw the faces of its brother or sister that were also dead. This woman had many such children who died. The woman, however, remained where she was after burying all of the children. Not one child saw the face of another child, but the woman had seen all of the faces of the children, and had within her a recognition of all those children. This is exactly like the three bodies that were born of the great causal body, which is in the form of the primal illusion, Maya. However, none of these three bodies ever had the chance of seeing the face of each other, or the face of their mother. Even while one state penetrates into the other, the knowledge present in all these states is never adulterated, just as in the example of the thread which supports all beads equally, where one bead does not penetrate into the other. The great causal body is like that, as it pervades all the other states like deep sleep, dream, and the waking state. The state of awareness, or consciousness in the great causal body, is the self-luminous flame which becomes naked without any covering whatsoever, by making ignorance forget itself. Once the nature of the witnessing knowledge is known, the state of ignorance vanishes completely. Though it is true that ignorance vanishes, it is not true that the appearance of the scene or manifestation also vanishes. It is only the attitude or the understanding of the aspirant that changes. By virtue of the intensity of the study, we will experience that all that is seen and appears is in the form of knowledge. As soon one gains the understanding that it is only gold that is perceived in a piece of jewelry, the piece of jewelry itself is not destroyed. Similarly, when it is known that everything that exists is only the Lord of the universe, the visible universe is not destroyed. Just as when the light of a lamp destroys darkness, the objects that become known do not vanish. At first there was no light, and nothing was known beyond the fact that there were some objective forms. The nature of the objects simply became clearly known in the light. In the same way, when we were looking at and feeling the world with blind eyes in the darkness of ignorance, the Sadguru's advice brings correct vision to our sight. When the flame of knowledge is lit, in the inner consciousness, it spreads light all around, and the darkness of ignorance is destroyed, yet the world appearance remains, as its true nature is uncovered and revealed. In this way, the point of view from which one was viewing the world changes after one acquires true knowledge. A mirage is viewed differently from the perspective of a man and that of a deer. The object is the same, but the seeing of it is different in each case. When sand in the desert or a road stretching out into the distance becomes hot from the sun's rays, the heat waves that rise will appear to be a body of water to someone standing far away. This appearance is called a mirage. In Marathi language, the mirage is called mrugyala. The meaning of this is an appearance of water at a distance that entices a deer. The reason for this name is that the deer is deceived by the mirage and imagines it to really be water and runs towards it to quench its thirst. Upon realizing the absence of water, the deer becomes disillusioned. It is the limited capacity of the deer's intellect that leads it to believe the appearance of water is true. And although it looks like water, a thirsty man will not run towards it to quench his thirst. The reason for this is that the mirage is not what it appears to be, and the man understands this. He is not deceived into believing that there is the presence of water there. This is the capacity of the human intellect for discerning the true from the untrue. From the point of view of the sun, there is nothing like a mirage. From where does the appearance of a mirage arise? It is similar to this that the attitude of an aspirant who is ignorant and therefore bound, and the attitude of a siddha or a liberated man are different. The one who is bound is driving the cart of practical duties, taking it for granted that the world is true. When an aspirant gains the knowledge of the self, he looks at the world with the attitude that it is just a temporary appearance or an illusion. However, the siddha is one who has become the self of all and does not see the world at all. At this point, the first part of the exposition of the teaching and everything regarding the physical gross body up through the great causal body has been included. The next part of the teaching that is given after the explanation of the great causal body is the teaching of the final reality. A person cannot be called a siddha even if he gains self-knowledge by becoming identified with the great causal body Satchitananda and has realized that state. Even though he is accomplished, he is still looked upon only as an aspirant, sadhaka. The field where the siddhas rest is in that field of supreme knowledge, or vijnana, thoughtless reality. However, we will not discuss that yet at this point. At this stage in the exposition, the step under our feet is the great causal body, Mahakarana body, also known as the Turiya state. First, we must discuss the great causal body in more detail. We have said that the great causal body is the state of the annihilation of ignorance. However, it should be understood that ignorance, the state of forgetfulness, comes into consideration only in relation to the gross and the subtle bodies. Actually, it has no real existence that has to be annihilated by acquiring knowledge. It is ridiculous to say that ignorance, or that which is not, has to be annihilated. For example, Rama has a ring, and Govinda does not have a ring. Does the absence of a ring indicate the state of existence of a certain thing called a ring? No, it does not. It is in exactly the same way that the state of forgetfulness, that is non-existent and appears only in relationship to the gross and subtle bodies, is an imagined state. It truly does not exist. Samartha Ramdas points out in his book Dasbodh that this state of ignorance in the form of forgetfulness is the state in which that which was not becomes non-existent. It is natural at this point that the question might arise: does the state of self-knowledge really exist? The one who saw the absence of dreams, imaginings, and doubts in the state of forgetfulness and knew of their absence or non-existence is the God of knowledge, Jnanadeva. It is he who witnesses the dissolution of all the modifications of knowledge and is the one who presides over the great causal body. However, it should be clearly understood that this witnessing knowledge is also a parasite, an unwanted presence on the pure nature of the self. This witnessing knowledge is only needed to be used to annihilate the ignorance of the causal body, which means having no knowledge. When the witnessing knowledge of the fourth body is left behind, the state of forgetfulness is forgotten, and knowledge sees only at itself. Observation of one's self cannot be called witnessing. The seer is called a witness when he forgets the self and sees something objective or different from the self. When seeing only himself, he abides in this supreme knowledge, Vijnana, which is of the nature of the Absolute. In that aloneness, one likes humming to himself, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. With that sound arising from within, even this knowledge is limited or bound and is still caught in the great causal body. This hum is the primal illusion. The original illusion that is of the nature of the three gunas gunamaya. If one wants to be rid of this illusion, even this humming sound has to stop for that rumbling primal illusion, mulamaya, to be permanently left behind. I am Brahman is a very subtle sense of I am that is imposed on the self, which is actually the absence of the ego, or a sense of separate self. However, even this subtle type of I am is like a molecule of salt in milk, and therefore has to be eradicated. To take the false as true is a mistaken concept. But to take the true as true is the absence of any such concept. By virtue of this statement, in the absence of all concepts, the gross body is I, the subtle body is I, and the causal body is also I. However, as long as one continues to assert oneself to be any of these three bodies, it is certainly a mistaken concept and a type of pride. This having been said, the consciousness that says I, as I am Brahman, can be called egolessness, or having no pride, because this I is upholding the truth. Where is the falsehood in it? Actually, there is nothing untrue or false in this. Yet, if that true one goes on announcing, I am true, or I am Brahman, there arises a doubt about this truth. If a Brahman, someone of the priest caste, goes on telling everybody he meets, I am a Brahmin, I am a Brahmin, the listener will say, if this man is a Brahmin, why is he repeating this? He must really be of some lower caste. In the same way, the repeated assertion of the concept I am Brahman, shows that this consciousness, this knowledge in the great causal body, is not free from doubt about its real nature. From this point of view, even the memory of the concept I am Brahman, that reminds one of the self, has to be erased. The consciousness Satchitananda that is of the great causal body should be stabilized to such an extent that it is of neither memory nor forgetfulness. Only then does the aspirant become the nature of pure knowledge and bliss. Even when we consider our usual daily gross experiences, we are in a natural state that is without any remembrance or forgetfulness. Does anyone have an experience like I have forgotten myself, or I was remembering myself? Has anyone ever tried to prove his existence by making such efforts? We do not ever forget ourselves, nor is it necessary to remember ourselves. We are always naturally in a state that is beyond the state of remembrance or forgetfulness. That is really our true nature. Remembrance or forgetfulness is always of something else that is separate from ourselves. From the basis of this truth, one should make a firm mental decision that whatever is remembered or whatever is forgotten is not I. It should be your firm conviction that whatever is remembered or forgotten is definitely not you. When there is no memory of self, or so forgetfulness of self, there is just being oneself, which can be recognized as self-illumination. Therefore, know that the gross body is not you, the subtle body is not you, and the causal body is not you. You are of the nature of self-knowledge. The awareness that I am the Satchitananda of the great causal body, you must constantly remain the same. Going by the theory of progressive elimination according to the instruction given above, once the conviction of one's true nature as pure knowledge, or I am, is realized, the four bodies have been collectively considered using the ancient method of investigation and deductive elimination. Up until now, it has been explained that you are not the three bodies. At this point, the Vedas again turn back and now announce that all of the visible appearance of the world is the sport or play lila of your own consciousness. There is a maxim or statement that goes like this: a thing that is produced is like the thing from which it was produced. For example, when water is turned into ice, it is still water. For the one who only sees superficially, water has a flowing tendency while ice is solid. Water has no shape and ice has shape. However, when the substance is known, they are known to be one and the same. According to this maxim, it can be understood that the world and its Lord Brahman are the same. This is the teaching in the Vedas. From the gross point of view, earth, water, light fire, wind air, and sky space appear different, but the difference is only in quality. Ice becomes water after melting, just as the earth gets dissolved in water, and water dries up by the heat of fire. Fire, or light, is contained in the wind, and wind gets diffused and simply disappears in the space, because the self is the womb of all these 5 elements. They all disappear in the self. If these principles were absolutely different from one another, they would never have dissolved into each other as one, without any remnant of difference. Consequently, the 5 elements, this gross world, and the subtle world are only the self. The self appears as all of the different characters and species. When a painter paints a tree, a stone, cows, buffaloes, a river, the sky, gods, demons, and human beings, they are all painted with a single thing called paint. In the same way, this spectacle appearing as the world in an infinite number of forms is nothing but pure knowledge. This is the bold and convincing deduction that one must conclude. One thing has to be mentioned at this point. It must be said that the method itself is of secondary importance, whether it is the method of deductive elimination or some different or contradictory method. The main purpose of a particular method is to impart the knowledge of the self. When an example in math is solved by several different boys, using various methods, and their answer is the same, it becomes compulsory to accept the answer as being right. The answer is what is important, and the method of arriving at the answer is of secondary importance. That is how the Vedas view the methods being used to explain to the aspirant the nature of one's true self. There is a snag in proving the identity of water and ice, the world and God, and gold and jewelry as being the same. Even if the gold and the ornaments are the same, the ornament could not be manufactured unless the goldsmith puts his skill to work on the gold, and water could only turn into ice by virtue of intense cold. Similarly, although the world and God are the same, the rationale still presents itself that this means that some transformation must have occurred in God. He solidified as earth, or melted and became water, then he dried up and became fire, etc. In this argument, first God became the 5 elements, and then the world was formed out of the 5 elements. This is a flaw in the method of deduction, and an objection can be raised in this manner. However, Samartha Ramdas has eradicated even this objection by the sentence, "Oh man, why are you asking about a thing which does not exist at all? The world has not come into existence. The absolute Parabrahman alone exists. To forget oneself is the birth of illusion, or Maya ma means is not, and ya means which. Maya is that which is not, which means that she is that which does not exist. How can one describe this non-existent woman? Is the barren woman's son fair or dark? What is his age, his height, his breadth, his caste? How can we answer these questions about that which has not come into being? To keep a child quiet from crying, he is told the scarecrow has come. He is quieted by the creation of the tale of a scarecrow that is not really there. After the child becomes quiet, he asks his father, "Daddy, what did the scarecrow look like? How long was his beard and how long was his mustache? How big were his nose, eyes, and teeth?" What answer can the father give? Until he responds the child is not going to keep quiet at such time. The father has to stretch the nose of the scarecrow as far as Rameshwara, and his feet up to the netherworld. and his head has to reach the sky. Thus, saying whatever he likes, he draws a frightening picture of the scarecrow, saying, "He is like this, and like that, etc. So do not cry again." This kind of description alone will match the description of Maya. The non-existent Maya exists, and she has created this world. The Vedas tried to explain to the Jivas, the human beings, how this world was created according to the capacity of their understanding. The Vedas somehow trace the source of Maya and the world. This is just the way it happened. It can be seen that the reasoning used in the deductive elimination method at times contradicts some other theory or method. Yet, instead of accusing the Vedas that since they tell one thing to A and another to B, that they are deceptive and telling wrong things, it must be said that the Vedas have explained the knowledge of the self to all by using different methods according to the capacity of the aspirant's intellect. The Vedas have eradicated their illusion, and as to who was deceptive, the aspirants were deceiving themselves as to the real nature of this world. The mother gives wheat porridge to one child and gives roti, a type of flat bread, to another child who is suffering from indigestion. Can you call this mother partial? That mother knows which food is beneficial according to the capacity of each child's digestion. Similarly, with regard to the Vedas, different methods are used for the different types of aspirants. They differ in intellect, but they are suffering from the same disease of samsara belief in mundane objective existence. Bhavaroga means the disease that created the idea that the world has been created. To treat this disease, the Vedas and various scriptures had to give explanation in different ways according to the aspirant's capability of understanding, even if a fever is only one symptom. A clever doctor will give different medications according to the physical condition of the patient. The doctor's goal is only the restoration of good health. There might be different medications, but there is no difference in the ideology. 1. Medicine suiting one patient may not suit another patient who has a different physical condition. Similarly, spiritual instructions given to one aspirant may not appeal to another. The knowledge or advice given to an aspirant who has a certain background may not be suitable for another who has a different background. There is no fault regarding the methods that Mother Shruti, the Vedas, gives. The faults are in the mental disposition of the aspirants at the time the exposition is made. Mother Shruti's final goal is to make all children attain self-knowledge. Therefore, the aspirant should abandon the fault-finding attitude and fulfill oneself by achieving the goal of acquiring self-knowledge. Chapter 4. The Great Causal Body. I am up to this point in the text. The explanation has focused on the definition of the four bodies. Now we will see how knowledge arises in these four bodies. To gain the knowledge of objects with sight through the gross body, it is necessarily implied that all of the four bodies are instrumental in bringing this about. If we take into consideration a pair of eyes that are drawn in a picture, it is obvious to us that those eyes cannot see an object. In the same way, the physical eyes alone cannot see an object without the help of the subtle eye of the intellect. For example, we see a mango, or have the knowledge that this is a mango. But what would happen if we were only to just see what the physical eyes alone see? Of course, the physical eye should also see the object as a mango, however, it does not happen like that. Behind the physical eye is the subtle eye of the intellect, whose help is sought to know the mango. However, even this combination of the physical eye and the subtle intellect is not sufficient. If these two do not have the support of the causal body, the intellect is dead. The causal body functions in various ways, like space, sky, the void, functions in various ways, like space, sky, the void, distance, etc. The intellect needs the background of space in order to function. So, now there is the I, the intellect, and space in the form of the causal body, but if there is no witness, in the form of the great causal body consciousness, I am to connect these three. There is no knowledge of anything. Thus, in order to get the knowledge of objects, it is necessary for all four of these bodies to be present. However, if we look progressively from one body to the next, it needs to be pointed out that in order to know the activity or changes in the subtle body, the physical body is not necessary. Additionally, the activity or changes that occur in the subtle body, such as attraction and repulsion, thirst and hunger, and pleasure and pain, can be known only with the aid of the causal and great causal bodies. However, looking in the other direction, in order for knowledge to arise in the causal body, the help of the gross and the subtle bodies is not required. At this stage in the explanation, it must be made clear that knowledge on any level is always dependent upon the great causal body. For gaining knowledge in the causal body, the elements of the subtle body mind, intellect, thinking, prana, and the senses are of absolutely no use. The elements of the subtle body only have influence over the gross and subtle bodies. The field of the causal body is entirely different from the gross and subtle bodies, and nothing from them can ever step into it. The question naturally arises at this point: if this is the case, how then? Can one enter into the great causal body? It is a fact that the scope of the mind and intellect is limited only to the subtle body, and they do not have the capacity to enter the further two bodies, the causal body and the great causal body. At this point, it must be stated that the knowledge of the great causal body Turiya is absolutely self-sufficient. It stands on its own, and has no dependency or expectation of help from the previous three bodies mentioned earlier. This knowledge is self-luminous. By way of analogy, even though the eye sees all objects, no object can see the eye. No one feels the need of the light of a lamp to see the sun. Similarly, nobody is capable of seeing this king of knowledge, which is the eye of the eye. This knowledge proves its own existence by its own luminosity, even though the eye cannot see itself. Anyone who has eyes never has doubts as to whether he has eyes or not. He can see because he has eyes. This type of certainty naturally abides in him. Similarly, one has knowledge of oneself while witnessing someone or something other than oneself. In order to see our eyes, we need a mirror in order to see the reflection of the eyes. That objective knowledge is only the reflected knowledge of the eyes. However, the knowledge of the great causal body proves its own existence by witnessing everything other than itself. For its proof of existence, no other evidence is required. This knowledge of the great causal body is all-pervading, and yet it is as if it were invisible from the ignorant being's point of view. Instead of seeing the knowledge of the great causal body, for him the gross body, which in proportion is like a poppy seed in the ocean, has become the biggest thing of all. The ways of this world are indeed perverse. It has become our habit that, when looking at a smaller thing, that which is objective, we forget the bigger thing, that which is subjective. We abandon that which is self-proving and self-sufficient and praise artificial things. It is like when words of praise are given to beautiful electric lights, yet we fail to give the same praise to the light of the sun, or when we look at the pictures painted on a wall and forget the wall itself. The process is such that even when we look at a wall, we forget the house itself. And when we discover objects in the light, we forget about the light. And when we are reading letters written on a piece of paper, we are not conscious of the paper at all. What actually happens in this process is that in spite of the fact that the pervading substance is infinitely bigger, when we pay attention to the pervaded object, we forget the pervading substance. The examples of gold and the ornaments, or earth and the wall, are commonly used to illustrate this point. The gross is pervaded by the subtle. The subtle is pervaded by the causal, and the causal is pervaded by the great causal consciousness or knowledge, however. Even with this being the case, the knowledge of the great causal body cannot be seen because everyone's attention is focused on the gross, and that which is objective, when the narrow focus of the aspirant widens, becoming that which is all-pervading, then one will have the vision of truth, the infinite knowledge that covers and envelopes the vastness of space. Although the knowledge that abides in the great causal body is the destroyer of the causal body ignorance, it cannot destroy the gross and subtle bodies, the ordinary and superficial objective knowledge that is gained through the gross and subtle bodies. It is not the destroyer of ignorance, only that extraordinary unique knowledge of the great causal body is the opponent of ignorance. Ignorance is actually sustained by ordinary objective knowledge. It is only after achieving that knowledge which is original that ignorance vanishes. However, at the same time, the functioning of the gross and subtle bodies does not stop. Just as the gross and subtle body's inherent activities function for an ignorant man, these activities also continue to function for the Jnani after he has gained self-knowledge. It is similar to the analogy of how the objects that are invisible in darkness are seen when the darkness is destroyed by the light of a lamp. The light destroys the darkness, but not the objects themselves. It is by the power of the light that the objects become known. It is only the darkness that is destroyed while the objects are illuminated. In the same way, when one gains self-knowledge, the darkness of ignorance is completely eradicated, yet the gross and subtle bodies continue functioning. In the natural progression of this exposition, the question arises, in the light of the knowledge of the great causal body, and with the destruction of ignorance, will the causal body cease functioning? Let us give this point some thought. Ignorance has many forms such as sky, space, point of contact, distance, etc. After gaining self-knowledge, it is true that ignorance is destroyed. In this self-knowledge, all impulses or activity movement appear in space as either subtle or gross desires. These impulses will not arise at all unless the space is first created. So what happens is this. When one looks at these bodies after gaining self-knowledge, the four bodies appear, or are viewed, in reverse order from the sequence that was used when each body was being transcended in the process of arriving at self-knowledge. First, self-knowledge I am, then the causal body in the form of space, then the subtle body, and after that, the gross body. All readily appear and take form, however, before the activities and functioning of the gross and subtle bodies become apparent, although the ignorance in the causal body has been destroyed. Out of necessity, the causal body establishes a step of space between the subtle body and the great causal body. Chapter 5. The appearance of the world. When knowledge begins to stir, activity or motion arises, and the causal body in the form of the space of consciousness, or Chittakash, is simultaneously created. Then, in sequence comes the subtle body, and then the gross body appears. In the method of gaining self-knowledge that has been expounded previously, the four steps that are ascended in sequence are: 1. The gross physical body 2. The subtle body 3. The causal body 4. The great causal body. Now the same sequence is reversed. 1. The great causal body 2. The causal body 3. The subtle body 4. The gross physical body. Instead of knowledge abiding peacefully within itself, it begins to stir and begins its downward descent. The last two steps, those of the subtle body and the gross body, cannot be stepped upon unless the third step, the causal body, is first stepped upon. Stepping down from this causal state, the last two steps, the subtle and gross bodies, arise. And it is on these steps alone that the appearance of the world is felt. Ultimately, what happens is this. The knowledge that contains the appearance of the world has not been able to completely destroy ignorance. Think about how light destroys darkness, thus giving us the knowledge of objects which were previously unknown because of the darkness. Similarly, the world appears only because the causal body has sustained it or preserved it. In space, as long as the appearance of the world is felt by either the Jnani one who has realized I am or an ignorant one, it must be understood that ignorance is still lurking in one form or another. The difference being that ignorance does not appear to a Jnani in that particular form. The Jnani experiences ignorance as knowledge, unless knowledge dies. Unless knowledge dies, ignorance does not die. Knowledge and ignorance are Siamese twins born of illusion Maya. They are both born and both die at the same time. If one is there, the other lives on, and when one dies the other is no more. Since this is the truth, we will see how knowledge itself dies. Before the knowledge in the great causal body dies, the bodies that are below it must all die. These four bodies die in sequence. When looking at a dying man, we do nothing but look at him. We do not die with him. In the same way, we can calmly look within ourselves at how these four bodies die. One principle that can be easily noticed about death is that when growth stops, dissolution begins. The meaning of this statement is that whenever something stops growing, it starts disintegrating and follows the path of death. It is unnecessary to do any work for death. Destruction is inherent in growth. In birth, there is death, and in death, there is birth. This is the tradition of birth and death. An object that is born dies its own death, even though there may apparently be some other reason. The root cause of death is nothing other than birth. These four bodies have come upon the pure nature, and they have to die. How do they die? How do they die? We shall see. The death of the physical gross body, according to the principle of where there is growth, there is destruction, can never be avoided. If not today, at least after 100 years, or some length of time, whatever it may be. The gross body grows until the age of 25 or so, and after that, the body begins disintegrating and slowly walks along the highway of death, until one day it becomes a victim of death, as the gross body is only the physical form of the subtle body. It can be said that it has no separate independent existence. A tree in its gross form is nothing but the result of its seed, which is the subtle form. Both forms of this tree automatically die off. The subtle body is the seed of birth and death. This seed does not get destroyed as easily as a tree. Its growth is so enormous that if it is not sought out and destroyed by man's effort, it will keep on growing indefinitely. This growth becomes the cause of an infinite number of gross bodies. This is what puts a being through births in 4 past 8 million species. When the growth of the physical body naturally stops, the subtle body does not stop growing. It is here that one feels the need for a Sadguru in order to understand how to stop the growth of the subtle body. Arresting the growth of the subtle body of imagination and doubts means giving up dreams and desires. Desires, dreams, worries, imagination, etc. are the products of the mind. The task of breaking them can be done only with one's own mind. Whatever is created by the mind cannot be destroyed by the hand, and conversely, whatever is created by the hand cannot be destroyed by the mind. Whenever we try to forcefully break up these dreams and desires, their number only seems to grow. The mind is frivolously disrespectful. When we try to curb it, it becomes more agitated. Therefore, to stop the growth of the mind, the Sadguru gives us the remedy. If you try to keep quiet, gradually the imagination and doubts dissolve. When a small infant is sleeping, if you observe its eyes for some time, you can easily learn a lesson from him how to stay quiet. When going to sleep, you will see how easily the infant slips into sleep, forgetting himself while you are looking at the baby. You can also slip into the state of forgetfulness, devoid of imaginings, dreams, desires, worries, and doubts. While a thorn can be taken out by the trick of using another thorn, the mind can only be broken with the mind. Birth and death, or appearing and disappearing, are the two opposite sides of the same state of consciousness. When one comes, the other goes, and conversely, when one goes, the other comes. Death dies its own death, like the demon Basmasura, who put his hand on his own head, thereby destroying himself. Thus, when the mind is broken, the state that is the causal body in the form of forgetfulness gets completely exposed, and the aspirant gets the knowledge of that state called forgetfulness. The remedy is to diligently practice remembering the instruction or the repetition of the mantra given by the guru. Once one begins to stop the growth of the mind slowly goes along the path of death and can gradually be completely annihilated. Moreover, one's study and putting into practice the teaching learned from the Sadguru have to be persistent. For example, once a tree starts drying up, even if one tries to keep it green, it will in due time start breaking up, then become uprooted, and eventually fall. Even if one puts plasters on the top of it, paints it, and tries to repair it again and again and again, a time will come when it comes crumbling down. In the same way, if the mind is constantly stopped from growing, one day it will automatically become tired and break up. However, the aspirant should not become tired of practicing. In this way, by persistent practice, the next body, the causal body, becomes exposed after the death of the subtle body. Once the curtain of the subtle body is destroyed, it ceases functioning as a covering over the causal body, and the causal body automatically becomes exposed. Now, let us see how the causal body dies. The causal body is the producer, or the father, of the subtle body. Whenever any state comes uninvited, the causal body is not invited. It is experienced for a short time, and once the flood of it recedes, it is not remembered. The state of it, while it is coming, is forceful and growing. Yet once the flood ebbs away, it is not even remembered. After having submerged everything for a short period of time, it begins to dissipate, and at last it becomes as if it were not there at all, and completely disappears. When a human being is getting roasted in the hot sun and then moves under the cool shade of a tree, at that very moment, the flood of cool peace comes to him with such force that he lets out laugh as an expression of joy. This shows that the flood of peace is overflowing from the inside as well as outside of him. However, after some time, that laugh automatically passes and he lies quietly unaware of his surroundings. Similarly, when the subtle qualities of the subtle body, such as its hurry and its struggle, becomes comparatively less, forgetfulness in the form of the peaceful void of the causal body is automatically forgotten. When this negative state is negated, it results only in negation. To kill it does not require a sword of a positive statement of the I Am. Sri Samartha Ramdas made this clear by the statement, the negative is negated by its own negation. When the state of forgetfulness is dissolved, the fourth body, the state of knowledge that is the Turiya state, becomes exposed automatically. Turiyasvastha, consciousness of consciousness. This state of knowledge comes to a being with the help of what? It comes in relationship with the state of ignorance. But even this state of knowledge, although very powerful, also dissolves eventually. When one attains knowledge, it is necessary that the knowledge also must be dissolved. That which comes has to go. As ignorance comes, likewise, knowledge comes. Thus, When the knowledge that is the great causal body dies, Parabrahman, which is inherent in all of the four bodies, is exposed. This Parabrahman is that which is never born and never ever dies. After each respective body dies, that one who sees the death of all of these bodies, yet remains, is your real nature. Experiencing the castes in a human being. Lord Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, I have created 4 types of castes. This can be a subject of experience for any human being. In his own self, my creation is divided into 4 parts, and these parts are divided according to their quality and karma activity. The 4 castes are Brahmana Brahmin, priest, Kshatriya warrior, Vaishya merchant, and Shudra laborer. The 4 bodies can be viewed along the same lines. The great causal body is of the Brahmin caste. The causal body is of the warrior caste. The subtle body is of the merchant caste, and the gross body is of the laborer caste. In this way, Paraman was dispersed into these parts within himself. The gross body is heavy and is an instrument used for service and labor, and therefore it is the Shudra laborer caste. Sitting on a mattress in the gross body, taking a balance in hand, and managing the business of the whole world is the intellect buddhi, who compares things as good and bad, big and small, and employs the laborer gross body as a servant to get things done as he likes, because he is the master. For this reason, this subtle body is the Vaishya merchant caste. Now look at the brave actions of the causal body. The causal body establishes his kingdom by swallowing up the entire wealth in the form of the world that was accumulated on the strength of the capital of desires, imagination, dreams, and doubts. It also swallows up the servants in the form of the gross and subtle bodies. This causality, which is one of total destruction, is the attitude of a warrior. And therefore, the state of the causal body is that of the Kshatriya warrior caste. Now what remains is only the great causal body Brahman caste. In this body, there is a complete neglect of all the other 3 bodies. I have nothing to do with the gross body, which puts in hard labor and dies. Neither do I have anything to do with that merchant in the form of intellect, who trades in ideas and dreams, and spreads the vast panorama of the world. I have also nothing to do with the warrior, in the form of the causal body, who sits quietly, as if nothing has happened after killing both the subtle and gross bodies. They all may do nothing, or let the gross body groan under hard labor, and let the subtle body do business with the world, and let the causal body wage war against these 2. What have I to do with any of these? There is a saying, think of the self Rama, and let the world fight. Knowing this very well, the great causal body went on announcing the Vedic words, I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, and sat quietly on his own ground. Reaching the high stage of Brahmanhood, this Brahmana Brahmin is very orthodox about the touch of another caste and cannot tolerate the touch of another body. The other bodies hold the great causal body in high esteem and smear their heads with the dust of his feet. From the point of view of Vijnana supreme knowledge, or final reality, even if this great causal body becomes polluted by being in contact with the other bodies, it is still the most sacred and highest in all the 3 worlds, the 3 bodies, the states of waking, deep sleep, and ignorance. The 3 worlds. The gross body is the material world Swarga Loka. The subtle body is the world of birth and death, Mrityu Loka. And the causal body is the nether world, Patala Loka. The great causal body is Brahman. These bodies are divided according to their qualities, and these worlds are known by these qualities. The gross body is the Swarga Loka and sits on top of, or covers the other worlds. All sorts of external enjoyments and activities are experienced in this world. The wonderful gardens and the beautiful forests are created for this world only. and the presiding deity here is Brahma Deva, the creator, whose main quality is activity, or the Raja's guna. The world below this is the world of death and birth, called Mrityu Loka. In this loka is a big factory of birth and death, where the qualities of appearing and disappearing are continuously being processed. This continuous process is nothing but the rising birth and setting death of mental modifications. In this way, one is born many times and dies many times during the same day. Everyone should keep for oneself an account of births and rebirths. Every idea produces a visible appearance, and when that idea sets, the appearance also sets. In this way, when ideas stop, it is the end of an era, or kalpanta, the final dissolution of concepts. This is experienced continuously in the subtle body. The scriptural writers have accepted the principle of creation and appearance. They stated that as soon as an idea rises, the world rises. And when the idea sets, the world sets, unless the subtle body, in the form of Mrityu Loka, is permanently destroyed and buried. Hundreds of eras are sure to rise and set. Therefore, one should die such a death that eliminates the further necessity of being born at all, and live in one's true nature in such a way that there is no fear of any further experience of dying. Let this be so. Whatever has to happen will happen. But until then, it is certain that this Mrityu Loka keeps its mouth wide open for entry. The abode of the subtle body is the inner mind, which is known as the Antakarana, or consciousness. The presiding deity here is Vishnu, and he nourishes the world. Note, Antakarana is a word that really has no single English word equivalent, and is difficult to define. Sri Siddharameshwar used this word frequently in many of his talks. So, it warrants some basic explanation. It is generally considered to be the seat of consciousness that is the spark, or genesis of subtle manifestation arising out of formless existence. It is characterized by the motion of the attributes arising out of the attributeless consciousness. One could say it is the source of the mind, or one's innermost mind, or one's innermost mind, or innermost heart. It is the origin of the assertion of objectivity. It is the mind at its most subtle. Sri Siddharameshwar Maharaj has said about it, the inner mind of all is the same. While our minds are different, throughout this text, it is translated as inner mind for consistency. The world below that knowledge of the inner mind is Patala Loka, the netherworld, which is the causal body in the form of forgetfulness. In Patala Loka, there is the pitch darkness of ignorance, the destroyer. Rudra Shiva, who is of the quality of ignorance, or tamas, is the presiding deity here. Above these three is the great causal body, which is the highest body and is therefore higher than these three worlds. The presiding deity here is pure knowledge. That knowledge rules here and is the God of all gods. From this God, all the worlds are produced. And he is called the Lord of the three worlds, Trilokyanath, the Brahmana knower of Brahman. Brahman caste is the guru of all the castes, and therefore is placed most highly among them. This gives him the status of a master. This Brahmana does not allow even the shadow of ignorance to fall on him. What's more is that he refuses to even become polluted by the mind and intellect. So, give up the idea that he will ever embrace the corpse of the gross body. This orthodox clean Brahman, in the form of pure consciousness, or universal cosmic consciousness, does not allow even a single entrant into his great causal body. Therefore, it should be understood that none of these bodies, or caste's warrior, causal body, trader, subtle body, laborer, gross body, laborer, gross body can ever enter into his abode. This means that the gross and subtle bodies can never enter the great causal body. These bodies' castes cannot do anything without the help of this Brahmana, the primal knowledge I am. All of their good and bad actions or works only go on the support and strength of this Brahmana. At this time, the Brahmana comes out of his dwelling and accomplishes the work of these three castes. As soon as the work is done, he cleans himself of any traces of them right in front of their doorstep, and only then enters back into his own abode. Understanding the knowledge of self. Brahman is rich with knowledge. That is why he is called Vedanarayana knowledge, that is God residing in all. He knows all the three times the beginning, the middle, and the end, and he has a characteristic of Sandhya, which is the space between any two thoughts. He is worshipped by all people, and therefore is also called the Lord of the world. The people of all castes and creeds worship this God, whether they are aware of it or not. The worshipper may be a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, a Jain, a Parsi, or a Buddhist. He may be from any country such as Iran, Turkey, etc. Yet he only worships this one God, whoever he may be. He cannot help it. When this one God is hungry, all types of food and drink are offered to him. There are mattresses with cushions made into beds ready for him to sleep upon. If he feels like traveling, there are cars, airplanes, and many other types of transportation ready for him. To supply him with fragrant garlands, there are many trees and vines that blossom forth laden with flowers. All servants and attendants are ready to obey him with folded hands. The wife, children, and palaces are for his entertainment, and they are also his dwelling place. God is dwelling in the innermost heart of all beings, and receiving all of the different kinds of service that are rendered unto himself. Yet, in spite of his greatness and omnipresence, we consider the body as God, and offer all kinds of services to it. The ignorant people have accepted this wrong idea, and have misunderstood the whole affair. It is this idea that has separated God from his devotee. What is there to be amazed about? Those who are doing any actions are doing it for no other reason than out of worship rendered to him. This great God Mahadeva is constantly enjoying the shower of all the objects of the senses in the form of sound, forms, touch, taste, and smell. He receives everything that is of the nature, the 5 instruments of senses of action, and the 5 instruments of knowledge. That devotee is indeed glorious who understands the secret of this great God. Mahadeva. All acts of such a devotee are naturally dedicated to Brahman. The bees, birds, insects, and even the ants are performing worship to this God. However, they don't have the intellect to understand this, so they cannot be blamed for their ignorance. However, it is unfortunate indeed that the intelligent human being does not understand that all of his daily and occasional actions are but for the sake of this one God alone. How very unfortunate this is. This God is the same as the King of Knowledge who, while swallowing a mouthful of food, tastes and enjoys it. It is he who discriminates between fragrance and stench. It is he who understands which sound is pleasant to the ear and which sound is harsh. It is he who observes the difference between a beautiful or a fierce and ugly form. It is he who understands the soft or hard touch. He is always present, reigning supreme in every being's heart. How utterly misguided is the idea that we worship any other God than this one. Just think of which God is worshipped when the Christians worship Christ. The Hindus worship Vishnu or Shiva. The Parsis worship their Zoroaster, or the Buddhists their Buddha. Are they not merely worshipping the corpses of these mentioned gods? However, What is the feeling of the devotee who is worshipping? Ask anyone from any religion, describe your God, and they will answer, my God is conscious, luminous, solid, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. He animates all and owns all. He is without birth and without death. Will anyone say that his God is a stone, or a rock, or mud, or metal, or heavy, dull, and vacant without consciousness, or that he is weak, blind, or deaf? From this, it is clear that whether it is Christ, Vishnu, Buddha, Zoroaster, or whatever God it may be, his nature will be full of consciousness, and he is full of the qualities of God. If anyone possesses all of these qualities, then the indication is that he is the absolute Paramatman. He is God in the form of knowledge that is present in everyone's heart. This God alone dwelled in Muhammad, and Christ's heart was pervaded by this one God as well. It is only by this God that the quality of Vishnu, the protector, has been sustained, and not by any other God. For any devotee, whomever he may be, that worships any God, that worship is the worship of this one inner self. The obeisance made to any other gods go to this one God, our own self-nature alone. This is the absolute truth. Alone. This is the absolute truth. The forms of all the above-mentioned gods are only temples of this one God. All the names belong to his temple's bodies. He is present in the innermost region of all these forms. He sits in all of the forms of all beings and accepts all their worship, whatever actions are done by the gross body, and whatever imagination or desires, or concepts and doubts that have crossed the mind happen for the sake of this God, in order to please him. If you recognize this much, your work is done. All of you are doing something through your body or mind. If you say, we do not want to do it, you cannot stop from doing it. However, whatever you do, the doer and enjoyer of your deeds is only God the Self. This fact alone must be recognized in every movement. All auspicious and inauspicious acts thus become dedicated to Brahman, and the aspirant remains absolutely free. This is what is called the sacrifice through knowledge, jnana yajna. When you come and go, speak or swallow, when you give or take, stand or sit, do any action at home or outside, or are in bed enjoying sex, leave off all sense of shame or doership, and think only of God. It is the one knowledge alone is playing at each point. To contemplate on this means contemplating on God. The body consciousness has to be turned into self-consciousness. The decision that the self alone is doing all is itself the state of liberation. This is the advice given by Samartha Ramdas. Even Saint Tukaram asked for this gift from God. May I never, never forget you. Likewise, we also must never forget the self. Then, surely salvation is at your feet. As this rope, in the form of the mind, was twisted in the direction of body consciousness, it now has to be twisted in the opposite direction of self-consciousness. When the rope gets untwisted, the strings will be blown about in the wind, and there will be nothing left to call rope. When a screw is screwed in, it has to be turned in the opposite direction to come out. Similarly, with regard to body consciousness, if the mind which is guided by the intellect is directed towards the self, it becomes absorbed in the self. As the mind is directed towards the one God, Lord Rama, it gets absorbed in Rama. The mind itself becomes Rama, and there is nothing left in the form of the mind, inside or out, or anywhere, and it becomes one with the form of Rama. Take this advice, and you will see this for yourself, to better understand just how the one pure knowledge is playing about. You have only to come out of the house and look at the moon. With what speed does the pure consciousness rush towards the moon out from the window of your mind? See how it pervades the whole sky in a fraction of a second. Try this. Does the mind have this much speed? The mind received the speed of awareness of the moon only through the help of this knowledge. Wherever the mind goes, consciousness is already there. What a wonder it is, then, that the movement of the mind seems stuck in this consciousness. You only have to open the eyelids, and the knowledge consciousness simultaneously pervades the entire sky. The vastness that contains the multitude of stars and the moon. Instead of saying that it pervades, it is better to say that it has already pervaded the whole, which is now experienced. When consciousness travels from the eye to the moon, and one recognizes it to be the moon, this is the objective knowledge. In this example, the moon is the object, and the consciousness takes its shape immediately upon knowing that it is the moon. If there is a cloud in front of the moon, the consciousness takes the shape of the cloud and is viewed as that object. Thus, consciousness pervades the cloud and knows the cloud to be an object. Chapter 6. Maya and Brahman. Now, try to notice the crust of consciousness that is without an object, the pure knowledge without the mixture of any objects. That space, which is lying between the eye and the moon, had not come to your notice, yet still it was there pervading, existing in its own nature. That is the pure form of knowledge, when empty space that is not noticed previously is purposefully made an object of attention. It becomes the object of attention as space. What can be noticed is Maya, and whatever cannot be seen is Brahman. While looking at the moon, the space in between did not come to your attention. Therefore, it is consciousness without an object. If this space is separated and is made an object of sight, this pure knowledge is transformed into a zero, because if space is seen separately, the modification of the mind becomes a void. If there is any difference between space and pure knowledge, it is this: to separately look at one's own nature as space, and when the looking is abandoned, it is pure knowledge. Once pure knowledge is recognized properly in this manner, even when mixed with any object, it can be selected and recognized. Once pure water is known, even when it is mixed with something else, its existence can be recognized within that mixture. Water is a fluid that can become condensed into ice, even when water gives up its fluidity and assumes the density of ice. It is still recognized as water in the form of ice. It is not difficult to recognize the wetness in mud as water. Similarly, once pure knowledge is known, its steady existence in this moving world in the form of Sat Chit Ananda being, consciousness, and bliss can also be recognized. Pure water is devoid of any color, form, taste, or smell. Once this is properly understood, even when water is condensed to assume a dense form, or takes on a hot flavor by adding chilies, or a sweet flavor by adding sugar, or if it becomes fragrant, or takes on a color such as rose, or is used as water in paint, it is quite unmistakably still recognized as pure water, or water minus the form, the taste, the smell, and the color. Thus, by the same method of elimination, even when this pure knowledge is conditioned, by subtracting the conditioning and by dividing the form into its respective elements, it will be recognized as absolutely pure knowledge alone that fills all form everywhere to the brim. However, if before attaining this pure knowledge by the method of elimination, someone accepts the method of enumeration listing the qualities of God, and goes on chattering about how God alone pervades all beings and all forms, and that there is nothing else but Rama, and that the world and the Lord of the world are but one, etc., etc., then such babble can never be useful. In contrast to this type of chatter, then contrast to this type of chatter. If one speaks only empty words without having the experience behind them, such as, I am Brahman, or the senses do their job, yet I am not the doer, or there is no sin or virtue at my doorstep, etc., instead of gaining the self. He will only deceive the self. In this way, these so-called self-discoverers lose the joy of this world, as well as that of the other world. Saint Kabir said, "He went away as he came." This means that these people die in the same state of consciousness as that in which they were born. They get no benefit from life other than this. Such worldly scholars take words to be true, self-knowledge. But has that truth which is beyond speech ever dawned on an ignorant man? Anyone can say the senses do the work of the senses, but I am not the senses. Or the mind's qualities are with the mind, and body's qualities are with the body. But what have I to do with them? I am different from these. What is untrue about these utterances? Who is it that understands the truth? Who is it that has the experience of truth? Only the one who knows who he is? Of what use are such statements to another? Each one enjoys his own pleasures and bliss. Tukaram said, each one for himself. Even a parrot can be taught to repeatedly say the words, Brahman is truth. The world is only an appearance, however. One cannot say that the parrot has understood the truth of what Brahman is, or what the world is, or even what a statement of truth is. Where there is no understanding, there cannot be the bliss of self-knowledge. Let that be as it is. However, an aspirant should not follow the example of one who is an expert with words, yet is a hypocrite, with persistent study, and by applying the method of elimination. One must first come to know what pure knowledge is. Knowledge is of different types, such as general, particular, objective knowledge of imagination and doubts, and the knowledge that is without any thought. The particular, objective, imagining, and doubting types of knowledge are contradictory to pure knowledge. When the pure consciousness through process of sight takes the shape of an object, one gets objective knowledge, or knowledge which can be of a particular type, or an imagination type, or of a doubt type of knowledge. If the object is gross, it is objective knowledge. If it is only an idea that is subtle, it is idea knowledge, or savikalpa. This means that when pure knowledge takes the shape of an object, an idea, or a thought, it then becomes categorized as particular knowledge. Particular knowledge, being artificial, is by nature transient and lasts only for a very short period of time. It is inherently transient and of an unsteady nature. However, the rule is that particular knowledge must return back into general knowledge, the knowledge that I am. As an example, when we walk, this is considered the common or general speed, and when we increase the speed and start running, it becomes a particular speed. Yet, how long can we run? After some time, the running stops, and soon one assumes the natural speed again. Similar to this, we are naturally very loving and blissful within, and this love within oneself is the general type of love common to all. However, when love is for a son, a friend, or a house, etc., it is an objective and a particular kind of love. Thus, a love that comes must also go. The love that comes is of a particular kind which is transient and destructible. The happiness that one gets from objects also falls into the category of being of a particular kind of happiness which only lasts for a very short period of time. A small thing brings in an experience of particular type. But while our attention is focused on that, the one thing that pervades it cannot be experienced. The reason is that the pervading thing is big and infinite. And in reality, we are that same all-pervading Brahman. The particular thing is Maya, and the general or common thing is Brahman. And we are that. When we are focused on the experience of a particular type, we do not experience the love of our own self, nor do we enjoy the happiness of the bliss of the self. We will now observe what is called general knowledge, which is devoid of an object or an idea. There is a slight distance between an outside gross object and the I, or the mind. That void or space, although unknowingly observed, is as if it were not seen, and therefore we have no knowledge or acknowledgement of that space. This intervening knowledge, the space being knowledge itself, cannot become the object of its own knowledge. How can sugar taste its own sweetness? In the same way, knowledge does not experience itself as an object. This knowledge is naturally spread out between the I and the object, as well as between the intellect and an idea or thought. One should repeatedly take notice of how this general pure knowledge naturally pervades everywhere before it acknowledges or recognizes an object. This noticing, or seeing, is not the same as seeing an object, such as, I am the seer of an object, or I am the thinker of an idea. It is only seen when one gives up both the seeing as well as the thought that I am the seer. The instrument of seeing is the I, and the instrument of knowing a thought is the intellect. Knowledge itself can only be seen by setting aside both of these instruments. The instruments of sight and the intellect are of no value here. Any attempt to know pure knowledge by means of the I or intellect is to forget that pure knowledge, the unadulterated sense of I am, by allowing these instruments to step in. To know pure knowledge really means not to know it. And once known in this way, the knower himself becomes pure knowledge. Samartha Ramdas has said, in trying to meet pure knowledge, one becomes separated from it. But there is always union with it without trying to meet it. This puzzle is very difficult. Wise men, yogis, and renunciates make a mistake and misinterpret the seen as the seer, when saying Paramatman is like this. He has 4 hands. He is like the light of 1,000,000 suns. He is lustrous. He is dark complexioned. He is like a point. And he is like this, and he is like that, etc. They say whatever they like, but by whose knowledge is it that it is stated that this one is like this, and the other is like that? That one is forgotten completely while they talk of the great things of realization. However, when the seer is forgotten, whatever is seen is I, which is Brahman. One does not know what to say of this. The brave one sets out to find Brahman, but the obstacle in the form of the seen gets in his way. This is the state of the majority of seekers. Search for the lost I. In a crowd during a pilgrimage, I lost myself, and could not find myself even when I tried searching within. Then, I went to the police station and gave them the information that I was lost. At that time, a constable came and slapped my cheeks hard until they were red and asked me, "Who is this fellow?" Only then did I become conscious of myself. Only then did I become conscious of myself, and was very happy that I was found. This is the very condition of the one that is himself Brahman, and yet is in search of Brahman. Where and how can he find himself? His exact position is such that he is the one who knows everyone, but is not known by anyone. The one who tries to know him does not know that his own true nature is pure consciousness, so he wanders about in the forest and jungle searching for that which has never been lost. How amazing this is! How can he, the one who is known only after the capacity of knowing has been transcended, be known? Unless one becomes steady within oneself, leaving behind having the desire to know, one cannot have the knowledge of Brahman. There is a story of one foolish fellow who wanted to know what sleep was. Whenever he would start to doze off, he immediately would remember, "Aha, now I will catch sleep." With that thought, he would clap his hands and suddenly become completely awake. Repeatedly doing this, the poor fellow became tired and entirely gave up his efforts of trying to catch sleep. Similarly, Trying to know Brahman is the same thing. When one gives up trying to know Brahman, one becomes Brahman itself. When the gross and subtle bodies are negated, the instruments of the mind and intellect are broken up. The aspirant then goes to the state of the causal body, which is the state of forgetfulness. This itself is the ignorance of the human being. To eradicate this ignorance, it is necessary to acquire the knowledge of Brahman. Therefore, the aspirant tries to get the knowledge of Brahman with the help of the subtle intellect, and that part of consciousness that is pure knowledge. Saint Shankaracharya Sri Shankara has called such a man a great fool if one tries to know Brahman in this manner with the subtle intellect. The subtle body will only go on increasing. When the subtle body gets destroyed, and one comes to the causal body, the one who is trying to know Brahman with the subtle intellect does not become steadied in the causal body. Instead, he gets pushed back to the subtle body with force from the causal body, and once again comes under the sway of imaginings, concepts, desires, and doubts. If an aspirant dreams, employing the use of words or the mind, he will never progress to where speech and mind cannot enter. Instead, he will go to a lower plane. The aspirant cannot remain as an aspirant, but has to become one who has accomplished a siddha. For this, one has to cross over the steps of all of the four bodies. By constant study, one has to enter on the platforms of the four bodies, and clean and clarify them through thorough investigation and deduction. Only then can the truth of the self be invoked and become fully established. Once this is done, it is certain that the aspirant will become a siddha. Up to this point in the text, the exposition regarding the four bodies and the method of study has been explained. The aspirants must also have understood what has been presented by way of analogy. If a wooden stool with 4 legs, made in the form of the bodies, has been constructed, it still is very crude. In order to make it shine properly, more effort has to be made. It is necessary to polish it in order to make it shine so that it can throw off its own light. The procedure for making something is quite different from the procedure of scrubbing and cleaning, thereby making it absolutely smooth and appealing. Unless it has been manufactured in that finished condition, it will be not considered finished, nor will it return a fair price. Therefore, before becoming a siddha, we must be aspirants for some time, persistently polishing the pure knowledge of the great causal body. It must be made completely clean.